a tremendous sense, a profound sense of sympathy for those people, those women who suffered as a result of his behaviour and his illegal criminal activities.
Lord Mandelson has admitted to continuing his relationship long after Epstein was convicted, and that there are more embarrassing details we don't yet know.
The Mandelson bombshell, how one Labour MP just torpedoed Starmer's America's strategy. Good evening, and welcome back to UK Connors, where we dissect British politics without the Westminster spin. If you're not already subscribed, hit that button now, because what we're about to unpack will fundamentally reshape how you see Labour's grip on power. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The corridors of Westminster are buzzing tonight, and it's not the usual parliamentary pleasantries. No, this is the sound of political careers potentially crashing and burning in real time. While most of the media establishment scrambles to manage the narrative, we're here to give you the unvarnished truth about what might just be Keir Starmer's most damaging crisis yet. Picture this scene. GB News political editor Christopher Hope, live from Westminster Hall, delivering what can only be described as a political earthquake. The gravity in his voice was unmistakable as he broke news that sent shockwaves through Labour's carefully constructed facade. Belry Belwaddy, a Labour MP who clearly hasn't received the memo about party loyalty, has just called for a full inquiry into Peter Mandelson's connections to Jeffrey Epstein. Yes, you heard that correctly. A serving Labour MP has just publicly challenged one of Starmer's most significant diplomatic appointments. Now, before we dive deeper, let's pause here, because if you think the story couldn't get more explosive, you're about to be proven spectacularly wrong. Make sure you're subscribed and that notification bell is on, because UK Connors is about to take you on a journey through the most treacherous political waters Britain has seen in months. The timing of this revelation is nothing short of devastating for Starmer. Just as Labour thought they'd successfully positioned themselves as the adults in the room, ready to rebuild Britain's international relationships after years of Conservative chaos, along comes a scandal that threatens to unravel their entire diplomatic strategy. Peter Mandelson, the man Starmer personally championed as Britain's key to unlocking Donald Trump's America, now finds himself at the centre of a storm that could define the remainder of Labour's time in government. But here's where it gets truly fascinating from a political strategy perspective. Belwaddy hasn't just lobbed a casual criticism across the parliamentary chamber. She's gone nuclear. Speaking to the newspaper, she's demanded a comprehensive investigation, stating with a kind of moral clarity that become increasingly rare in Westminster, there should undoubtedly be an investigation because there will be widespread worry, and if the conclusion is that he should quit, he will do so. This isn't political theatre. This is a direct challenge to Starmer's judgment and, by extension, his authority as Prime Minister. The documents that triggered this political firestorm weren't leaked by some shadowy opposition research team. They came from a U.S. congressional committee, lending them an institutional credibility that makes them impossible to dismiss as partisan attacks. These documents reveal that Mandelson's name appears in Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday book, a grotesque memento compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell herself. The same Ghislaine Maxwell who's now serving time in an American prison for her role in facilitating the abuse of minors. Let's be brutally honest about what this means for Labour's carefully crafted narrative. For months, they positioned themselves as a party of competence, the steady hands who would restore Britain's international standing after the chaos of the Conservative years. Starmer personally vouched for Mandelson, describing him as playing a key part in improving UK-US relations. Now, that endorsement looks less like shrewd political judgment and more like a catastrophic misjudgment that could haunt Labour for years to come. The images that emerged overnight paint a picture that's deeply uncomfortable for any political leader trying to maintain moral authority. There's Mandelson, photographed in a toweling robe, apparently in conversation with Jeffrey Epstein. As Christopher Hope observed with characteristic understatement, we knew there was a relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein, but frankly, it seems to run much deeper and far more intimate, which is why it's so devastating. And here's where the story takes an even more disturbing turn. A handwritten letter from 2003 has surfaced, penned by Mandelson himself to the disgraced financier, declaring, "Wherever in the world, he is still my best friend." The casual intimacy of that phrase, the exclamation mark suggesting genuine warmth, creates an image that no amount of political spin can erase. This wasn't a distant professional acquaintance. This was someone Mandelson considered among his closest confidants. The timeline here is crucial to understanding just how damaging this is for Labour. Maxwell compiled Epstein's birthday book 3 years before allegations of sexual misconduct against minors became public knowledge. But that detail, while potentially mitigating in a legal sense, does nothing to address the fundamental political problem Starmer now faces. In an era where voters demand their leaders demonstrate impeccable judgment, how does a prime minister explain away his wholehearted endorsement of someone with such intimate ties to one of the most notorious criminals of our time? What makes this scandal particularly potent is how it cuts against everything Labour has tried to represent since taking power. They position themselves as a party of integrity, the antithesis to the sleaze and scandal that characterized the final years of Conservative rule. Starmer's entire political brand has been built around the concept of moral seriousness, of being the adult in the room who makes responsible decisions based on clear ethical principles. The Mandelson appointment, viewed through this new lens, suggests either catastrophic due diligence failures or, worse, a willingness to overlook serious concerns for the sake of political expediency. Rebeo Addy's intervention represents something genuinely unprecedented in modern Labour politics. As Christopher Hope noted, that's the first time we have a Labour MP breaking the ranks in opposition to Peter Mandelson. This isn't just any backbench MP testing the waters. This is a serving member of Starmer's own parliamentary party publicly questioning his judgment on one of his most high-profile appointments. The precedent this sets is extraordinarily dangerous for any prime minister, but particularly for one whose authority is still being established. The defensive response from Downing Street tells its own story. Rather than addressing the substance of the allegations or providing a robust defense of Mandelson's character, the Prime Minister's official spokesperson retreated into standard diplomatic language. We are focused on our relationship with the U.S. and President Trump moving forward, with the unprecedented second state visit next week to build the headway we have made between our governments so far. This is a language of a government in damage control mode, hoping to redirect attention away from uncomfortable questions rather than confronting them head-on. But here's why this strategy is likely to backfire spectacularly. British voters have become increasingly sophisticated in recognizing political evasion. After years of being told half-truths and witnessing the consequences of poor judgment at the highest levels of government, they are unlikely to accept deflection as a substitute for accountability. Starmer's refusal to directly address the Mandelson question will be interpreted not as diplomatic discretion, but as weakness and moral evasion. The international dimension of this scandal adds another layer of complexity that Labour seems ill-equipped to handle. At precisely the moment when Britain needs to project strength and reliability on the world stage, particularly in its relationship with Trump's America, the government finds itself defending an ambassador whose personal associations raise fundamental questions about judgment and propriety. How does Starmer expect to maintain credibility in international negotiations when his own diplomatic appointments become sources of embarrassment rather than strength? Mandelson's own attempts to distance himself from Epstein ring hollow in light of these new revelations. His claim to Sky News that his association with Epstein is something that I regret and that he wished he had never met him in the first place might have been sufficient damage control before these documents emerged. Now, with evidence of intimate friendship and regular contact, such statements appear less like genuine contrition and more like calculated political positioning designed to minimize fallout rather than acknowledge the full extent of the relationship. If you're finding this analysis valuable, and I suspect you are given how far we've come together, make sure you're subscribed to UK Connors. We're the only channel giving you this level of unfiltered political analysis, and trust me, there's so much more to unpack as this story develops. The broader implication for Labour's electoral prospects cannot be ignored. Politics, at its core, is about trust, and trust, once broken, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. The Conservative Party may be in disarray, but scandals like this provide them with precisely the ammunition they need to begin their rehabilitation in the public mind. Every time Starmer stands at the dispatch box claiming moral authority, every time Labour MPs criticize their opponents for ethical failures, this moment will be thrown back at them with devastating effect. What's particularly galling from a tactical perspective is how entirely avoidable this crisis was. Mandelson's associations with controversial figures weren't exactly state secrets. Anyone conducting even basic due diligence would have uncovered the Epstein connections. The fact that Starmer's team either failed to uncover this information or chose to proceed despite knowing about it suggests a level of political malpractice that should concern every voter regardless of party affiliation. The precedent this sets for future appointments is equally troubling. If the Prime Minister's judgment can be so spectacularly wrong on such a high-profile position, what confidence can we have in the thousands of other appointments made with far less scrutiny? The machinery of government depends on competent, properly vetted individuals being placed in positions of responsibility. This scandal suggests that Labour's approach to such appointments may be dangerously casual. Ribeiro Addy's courage in speaking out deserves particular recognition in an era when parliamentary backbenchers increasingly behave like lobby fodder rather than independent representatives. Her willingness to prioritize principle over party loyalty demonstrates exactly the kind of moral backbone that voters claim they want from their representatives. The fact that such behavior is now considered noteworthy rather than routine tells us everything we need to know about how degraded our political culture has become. The media's handling of this story will be fascinating to watch unfold. Already, we can see attempts to minimize the damage, to frame this as a historical association rather than an ongoing concern, to suggest that Mandelson's undeniable diplomatic skills outweigh any reputational baggage. But British voters have developed a keen nose for media manipulation, and such obvious attempts at damage limitation are likely to backfire by drawing even more attention to the underlying issues. From a strategic perspective, Starmer now faces an impossible choice. Backing Mandelson sends a signal that Labour's commitment to ethical governance is negotiable when politically convenient. Withdrawing support, however, would represent a humiliating climb down that would raise serious questions about the Prime Minister's judgment and decision-making processes. Either way, the scandal has already inflicted significant damage on Labour's carefully constructed image. The international ramifications extend far beyond the immediate UK-US relationship. Other world leaders will be watching how Starmer handles this crisis, drawing conclusions about his strength, judgment, and reliability as a partner. In an increasingly complex global environment, Britain cannot afford to have its diplomatic effectiveness compromised by scandals that were entirely preventable. What makes this story particularly compelling is how it encapsulates so many of the broader themes that define contemporary British politics. The tension between expertise and ethics, the challenge of maintaining moral authority while pursuing practical objectives, the difficulty of escaping historical associations in an era of unprecedented transparency. These aren't abstract philosophical questions. They're the concrete dilemmas that shape real political outcomes. The Conservative opposition, despite their own considerable challenges, must be salivating at the opportunities this scandal presents. Every Prime Minister's question session, every parliamentary debate, every media interview now provides them with a ready-made attack line that strikes at the heart of Labour's claim to moral superiority. The political gift that keeps on giving, courtesy of Starmer's own poor judgment. As this story continues to develop, and develop it certainly will, UK Connors will be here to provide the analysis and insight you won't find anywhere else in the British media landscape. We're not interested in party political spin or Westminster bubble thinking. We're interested in the truth, however uncomfortable it might be for those in power. The Mandelson scandal represents more than just another political embarrassment. It's a fundamental test of whether Keir Starmer possesses the strength and judgment necessary to lead Britain through increasingly challenging times. His response to this crisis will define not just his immediate political prospects, but his long-term legacy as Prime Minister. The early signs, frankly, are not encouraging. So there you have it. A scandal that began with a routine parliamentary report has exploded into a crisis that threatens to undermine everything Labour has tried to build since taking power. Bell Ribeiro Addy may have thought she was simply holding her own government to account. In reality, she may have just lit the fuse that brings down one of the most significant political figures of our time. This is exactly the kind of story that UK Connors exist to tell. While others focus on the surface-level drama, we dig deeper into the implications, the strategies, and the long-term consequences that will shape British politics for years to come. If you're not already subscribed, you're missing out on the most insightful political analysis available anywhere in the British media landscape. Hit that subscribe button, because this story is far from over, and you won't want to miss what comes next.